Yogaha Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hello students, my name is Ishan Shenolekar and today I will be speaking about price ceiling. Let us look at the objectives of this session. The objectives are to understand the meaning of price controls in general, further to understand the meaning of price ceiling, then to assess the impact of price ceiling on market outcomes, further we discuss a case study on rent control, and finally we study the short run versus long run dynamics. Let us start with price controls. To understand the impact of price controls on market outcomes, consider the market for ice cream for example. In an unregulated competitive market that is without government intervention, the price of an ice cream naturally adjusts to balance supply and demand. This means that at the equilibrium price, the amount of ice cream buyers want to buy or purchase matches exactly with the sellers that they are willing to sell. Suppose this equilibrium price is $3 per cone. However, not everyone is satisfied with this market price. The American Association of Ice Cream Eaters, for example, argues that $3 is too expensive for everyone to enjoy a daily cone, their suggested daily intake. On the other hand, the National Organization of Ice Cream Makers, for example, claims that $3 is too low due to intense competition which is harming their members' incomes. Consequently, both groups lobby the government to intervene and control the price of ice cream cones. Buyers typically prefer lower prices, whereas sellers want higher prices, leading to a conflict of interest. If the ice cream eaters succeed in their lobbying, the government enforces a legal maximum price for the ice cream cones, known as price ceiling, which prevents prices from rising above this particular limit. Conversely, if the ice cream makers succeed, the government sets a legal minimum price called a price floor, ensuring prices do not fall below this threshold. Let us now examine the effects of these policies. First, the effect of price ceilings on market outcomes. When the government, influenced by the ice cream eaters' complaints and donations, enacts a price ceiling in the ice cream market, there are two possible outcomes. In the first scenario, as depicted in panel A of figure 1, the government sets a price ceiling of $4 per cone. Since the equilibrium price is $3, which is lower than the ceiling, this price is called non-binding. As a result, market forces naturally maintain the economy at equilibrium and the price ceiling has no impact whatsoever on the price or quantity of the ice cream sold. Let us understand this in a little bit of detail. In an unregulated market, the price mechanism functions to balance supply and demand. For ice cream, suppose the equilibrium price is $3 per cone, where the quantity demanded by consumers matches the quantity supplied. However, interest groups may find this price unsatisfactory. Consumers may feel it is too high, as we have seen, limiting their access, while producers may feel it is too low, affecting their profits. When consumers lobby for lower prices and succeed, the government may impose a price ceiling, a legal cap on prices. If this ceiling is set above the equilibrium price, like $4 when the equilibrium is $3, it is non-binding and has no effect because the market price would remain at equilibrium. Market dynamics continue to naturally regulate the price and quantity of ice cream without interference. Conversely, if producers lobby for higher prices and succeed, the government may impose a price floor, as we have seen, a minimum that prevents prices from dropping below a certain level. This can lead to different market outcomes, which depends on the flow's reaction to equilibrium price. In summary, price controls in general, such as ceilings or floors, are tools used by the government to intervene in the markets, often influenced by lobbying groups with competing interests. The actual impact of these controls depend on how they are set relative to the market equilibrium. Non-binding price ceilings or floors do not affect the market at all. The equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity remain the same, while binding controls can lead to significant market changes, including potential surpluses or shortages. Let us now look at the effects of a binding price ceiling on market outcomes. Looking at panel B of figure 1, it illustrates a more significant scenario where the government enforces a price ceiling of $2 per ice cream cone. Since the equilibrium price is $3, which is higher than the ceiling, the price ceiling becomes a binding constraint, that is, now it will have an impact. While supply and demand would typically drive the price towards equilibrium, the ceiling legally prevents the price from rising above $2. Consequently, the market price is fixed at the ceiling price. At this price, the quantity of ice cream demanded, that is 125 cones, exceeds the quantity supplied, that is 75 cones, as you can see from the figure, and this leads to an excess demand of 50 cones. This creates a shortage where some customers who want to buy ice cream at a controlled price are unable to do so. To address this shortage, some form of rationing will naturally emerge. This could involve long queues where those willing to wait in line early get ice cream, while others will not get ice cream. Alternatively, sellers might ration ice cream based on personal preferences, favoring friends, relatives or specific groups. It is important to note that although the price ceiling is intended to help buyers, not all buyers benefit equally. Some buyers may enjoy a lower price but have to endure long waits, while others may not get any ice cream at all. This example from the ice cream market demonstrates a general principle, that is, when the government imposes a binding price ceiling in a competitive market, it results in a shortage, requiring sellers to ration the limited supply among many potential buyers. Let us look at this explanation in a bit of detail. In a competitive market without regulation, the price adjusts to balance supply and demand. However, when the government imposes a price ceiling below the equilibrium price, it disrupts this balance. Let us have a scenario with a binding price ceiling. First is, the government sets a maximum price, that is price ceiling, a legal maximum of $2 per ice cream cone, while the equilibrium price is $3. Let us look at the impact on market price. Since the ceiling is below the equilibrium price, it becomes binding, as we have seen. Market forces would normally push it towards $3, but the ceiling prevents it from going above $2. At the ceiling price of 2, the quantity demanded is much larger than the quantity supplied, as we have seen from the figure. This scenario is called excess demand or shortage of the amount of cones, that is 50 cones in this example. Due to the shortage, not everyone who wants to buy an ice cream at $2 can get it. Some form of rationing will occur. Buyers may have to wait in long queues, where those who arrive early and are willing to wait get the ice cream. Further, sellers might allocate ice cream based on personal preferences, selling only to friends, family or specific groups. Now, what are the implications for buyers? The price ceiling aims to make ice cream more affordable for the buyers. Some buyers benefit by paying a lower price but may have to wait in line. Others may not get ice cream at all due to shortage and rationing. So, what is the general principle in this entire analysis? This particular scenario that we have seen illustrates a broader economic principle, that is, binding price ceilings in competitive markets lead to shortages, forcing sellers to ration the limited supply. When the policy aims to benefit buyers, it often results in unequal access and unintended consequences. Now let us look at a case study. Price ceiling on rent control in New York City. First, we start with the introduction of this case. Price ceilings are common government interventions, as we have seen, in markets to make essential goods and services affordable to consumers. One of the most well-known examples of a price ceiling is rent control in New York City. This case study explores the implementation of rent control, which is a policy measure, and its effects on housing markets and the broader economic implications. Let us have a background of this case. Rent control in New York City was first introduced during World War II as a temporary measure to protect tenants from exorbitant or high rents increasing due to housing shortage. Over the decades, various forms of rent controls or regulations have been maintained, aiming to provide affordable housing in one of the most expensive cities in the world, that is New York. Now let us look at this idea of price ceiling with reference to the case. Rent control laws establish a maximum price or rent ceiling that landlords can charge the tenants. This ceiling is typically below the market equilibrium rent, hence it will be a binding constraint. The main type of rent regulation in New York City, for example, are rent control. It applies to buildings built before 1947 and occupied by the same family since 1971. Another kind is rent stabilization. This applies to buildings with 6 or more units built between 1947 and 1974 and to certain buildings constructed or renovated after 1974 with tax benefits. Now let us look at the effect of these rent controls on market. First is the demand and supply imbalance. At the controlled rent, the quantity of rental housing demand exceeds the quantity supplied. This creates a housing shortage. Tenants are eager to rent at lower controlled prices, but landlords are less inclined to rent out or maintain properties due to lower returns. Next is long waiting lists. Potential tenants face long waiting lists to find rent controlled apartments. The limited supply and high demand result in extensive search times and competition for available units. Next aspect is quality of housing. So reduced incentive for maintenance is one of the aspects of this particular policy. Landlords earning lower rental incomes are less incentivized to invest in property maintenance and improvements. Over time, this can lead to the deterioration of housing quality in rent controlled buildings. Next is black market and under the table payments. The shortage and high demand sometimes lead to illegal subletting and under the table payments where tenants pay additional fees to secure a controlled rental unit. Now that fee is completely illegal and is unrecorded of. Moving on to the next aspect, that is allocation inefficiency. So the first part is mismatched allocation. Rent control does not account for the tenant's ability to pay or their need for housing, leading to mismatched allocation. Here, not all those who require the house actually might end up getting the house. High income tenants may occupy controlled apartments with low income individuals struggling to find affordable housing. Further, reduced mobility. Tenants in controlled apartments are less likely to move, even if their housing needs change due to the benefits of lower rent. This reduces the overall mobility within the housing market, making it harder for new entrants to find new home. Now let us look at the broader economic implications of this case. First is impact on investment. Rent control discourages investment in rental properties. developers may be less inclined to build new rental units if they expect returns to be limited by rent regulation. This can exacerbate housing shortages in the long term. Next is neighborhood effects. Area with high concentrations of rent controlled units may experience slower economic growth and reduced poverty values. Conversely, neighborhoods without rent control may see increased investment and high property values. Further, we have government costs. Implementing and enforcing controls require administrative costs. There are also potential costs related to legal disputes between landlords and tenants over rent regulation and other compliances. Now let us look at the conclusion of this case. Rent control in New York City exemplifies the complex effects of price ceilings on market outcomes. While the policy aims to make housing affordable, it also leads to significant unintended consequences, including housing shortages, reduced property maintenance, and market inefficiencies. The case of New York City highlights the trade-offs policymakers must consider when implementing price ceilings and the importance of balancing affordability with market incentives to maintain a healthy housing market. Further, we move on to the short run and the long run dynamics, and we continue with the similar example. The adverse effects of rent control are often not immediately apparent to the general public because they manifest over a prolonged period. In the short term, landlords have a fixed number of apartments to rent, and they cannot quickly adjust this number in response to changing market conditions. Similarly, the number of people searching for housing in a city may not respond significantly to rent changes in the short run, as people take time to adjust to their housing arrangements. Consequently, both the short run supply and demand for housing are relatively, as we call, inelastic. Looking at the short run effects, panel A of figure 2 illustrates the short run effects of rent control on housing market. Any binding price ceiling rent control results in a shortage. However, due to the inelastic nature of supply and demand in the short run, the initial shortage is relatively smaller. Now let us look at the long run effects. The situation changes dramatically in the long run as buyers and sellers of rental housing respond more significantly to market conditions. On the supply side, landlords react to low rents by not building new houses or apartments and by neglecting the maintenance of existing ones. On the demand side, low rents encourage people to seek their own apartment instead of living with parents or sharing with roommates, and attract more people to move into the city. This makes the demand relatively more elastic or responsive, as we saw the supply changes and demand changes in the longer run. Therefore, both supply and demand become more elastic over a period of time. So, panel B in figure 2 depicts the long run housing market. When rent control suppresses rents below the equilibrium level, the quantity of apartments supplied decreases substantially, while the quantity demanded increases significantly, leading to a large housing shortage. The rationing mechanisms for this kind of a case are: in cities with rent control, landlords use various mechanisms to ration the limited housing supply. Some maintain long waiting lists, others prefer tenants without children, and some engage in discriminatory practices based on race. Occasionally, apartments are allocated to those willing to make under the table payments. So, building superintendents effectively bringing the total cost and apartment closer to equilibrium price. What are the incentives and market behavior? To fully understand the effects of rent control, it is crucial to remember one of the 10 principles of economics. People respond to incentives. In a free market, landlords strive to keep their buildings clean and safe because desirable apartments can command higher prices. Conversely, when rent control creates a shortage and waiting lists, landlords lose their incentive to address tenants' concern. For example, why would I be concerned about keeping an apartment clean when I know the price that I am going to get, that is the cost for the buyer, is relatively low. With a ready pool of prospective tenants, why should a landlord spend money to maintain and improve the property? Consequently, while tenants may benefit from lower rents, they also experience a lower quality housing. Policy response and regulatory challenges for this kind of a case. Policymakers often respond to negative effects of rent control by imposing additional regulations. For instance, laws may prohibit racial discrimination in housing and require landlords to provide minimally adequate living conditions. However, these regulations can be difficult and costly to enforce. By contrast, when rent control is abolished and the housing market is regulated by competitive forces, such laws become less necessary. In a free market, the price of housing adjusts to eliminate shortages, reducing the undesirable behaviors that rent control can foster among landlords. Now let us conclude this entire session. Rent control, while well intentioned, leads to several adverse long term effects, including significant housing shortages, reduced housing quality, and inefficient rationing mechanisms. Understanding these effects requires an appreciation of both short term and long term market dynamics and the importance of incentives in driving landlord and tenant behavior. I hope you enjoyed and understood this session. Thank you so much.